what it means to be overlooked. And so we enter into this work with a certain level of passion, right? And acknowledgement. I'll say that my career began in food.
Hey, it's Kellen, and today on Diversified Game, I have Rachel Lauren of, guess what the name is, folks? Diversified Now. Man, she's already diversifying the game, and that's what her business is all about. Diversity, inclusion, equity, all those things that we hear so much in corporate, but a lot of times, you guys, they don't look like her. They don't have the experience that she has either. You know, she's going to give us the game on what and how she does Diversified Now. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming, man. Let the people know, because people always hear, "Oh, I do diversity work. I do this. I do that." Everybody's diversity work is not the same. So, what is your focus and what is your why when you tell us all of this?
Well, first, I want to say I'm one of 3 partners, and my other 2 partners are also Black women. And I think that that's important to note in a world that, professionally we're underrepresented. We're underrepresented. We don't have seats at the table like we should. Our voices are often just not heard. And so it was really important for us to come together and establish something that we can, assist communities in, but be Black women, because who better? That's personally how I feel. We understand what it means to be overlooked. And so we enter into this work with a certain level of passion, right? And acknowledgement. I'll say that my career began in food and beverage. I managed different restaurants. I entered into kind of marketing, leading teams, working in hospitality. And then I entered into tech. So I worked for various tech companies, and I actually was in sales. And everywhere I went, I was token. And everywhere I went, I was asked to answer diversity issues, to become the expert. I was expected to know what it meant to implement D&I, right, into businesses. And that's the story for many of us. That's what you'll find. I believe that, when things happened this summer, there has been, with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, there has been an extreme kind of like change and shift that people have had. They want to now acknowledge that this is more than a side desk job. They're starting to realize that this is a full-time position. But I'll say how I got here was really birthed in, I kept doing this. It kept showing up. I became the expert because I've lived through it. And that's really, really where it came from.
Now, some folks will say, okay, I mean, you're doing diversity, makes sense. Folks will say, oh, we've heard this over and over. But, what qualifies you? Because I always say you have an unfair advantage as a Delta on how to knock down doors. And so, you are the token, but how can you show corporations, especially, where their flaw is, how they're being biased, racist, any type of ism, when you go into corporate? And with that, what is the biggest mistake you see corporations making?
Well, I think when we talk about diversity, we have to recognize that it represents a lot of different things, right? So sexual preference, race, religion, ethnicity. There are a lot of things that contribute to diversity. What we've learned, especially in recent times, individuals that weren't willing to admit this, what we've learned is that race is the thing that has to be talked about first. Because I can enter into a room as a woman and know that I have disadvantages because of my gender. However, I enter into a room as a Black woman and now I have disadvantages because of my gender as well as my race. So what I would say is race is the first step of my work. It's the uncomfortable conversation that I require people to have, because you're not going to understand diversity. You're not going to understand equity. And you definitely are not going to be able to build inclusive environments if we don't first go there. So when you ask why me, it's because I've had a few strikes, right, against me before I came into a room. I'm Black, I'm a woman, I'm Afro-Latina. So when I enter into a space, there are 3 things that I'm already having to overcome. And so I understand and I see disparities in ways that a lot of individuals don't. And I have passion in ways that a lot of individuals don't.
And when you mention the Afro-Latina folks who are listening, which the majority of the audience is listening and not watching, but people might see this and say, oh, I didn't know she was Afro-Latina. And then what is Afro-Latina? Because some folks will say, ¿Cómo es tu español? And if you don't respond to them back in the accent that they want, oh, okay, well, she learned Spanish after, or she's not from Colombia, or she's not from, Panama. So, how do you balance that and experience? Tell us.
Well, I think the first thing is, again, going back to race and ethnicity. The problem is that a lot of people don't understand the difference between the two. And so we have to realize that race is a social construct, and it's completely built around what someone looks like. When you see someone, the physical characteristics that you associate with a particular group. So I am a Black woman. And when you see me, to your point, you'll identify me as a Black woman, and I want you to. When you talk to me, then I can start talking to you about my ethnicity. And so ethnicity is really more so about, your language, the culture that you identify with, the food that you eat, the religion that you choose. All of those things relate to ethnicity. And so what happens is a lot of people think that ethnicity and race are the same thing, instead of realizing that it's separate. So when individuals have arguments about people within the Latinx community standing up and saying, I'm Black, they can, because if they racially present as a Black person, then they deal with all of the things that come along with being a Black person in our society. So I think that's the first thing. I have to teach individuals when I go into organizations and coach, people, what it means to ask questions. And so what we are trained to do is just assume. As a society, we assume. We see people and we just say that's what they are, right? We stop at race, and we don't have the conversations to really enable people to self-identify. This is what I see you as, and I know that you are going to have to deal with certain things when you walk down the street because everyone else sees you as that same thing. But what do you identify as, and what does that mean to you? So I am very vocal about who I am, and I am authentically me all the time. When I walk into a room, you're going to see me as a Black woman, and you're going to see me as a powerful Black woman. And then when we have conversation, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my experiences and who I am and why it's important to me.
And do you speak Spanish?
I don't.
Let's talk about that, because a lot of folks who weren't taught Spanish to the Latin community sometimes like an abomination. And they'll ask, well, how do you then identify when no entiendes? So how has that journey been? Because I find that to be kind of hurtful, especially in America, when someone, even if they look Mexican and they don't speak Spanish, or their Spanish isn't perfecto, people will look at them like, you're not as Mexican, even though I know your mom and your dad. So what are your people? Where are they from? Donde eres?
So my mother was born and raised in Puerto Rico. Bayamon is where she is from. She actually moved all over. My grandfather was in the Army, so she lived everywhere. She lived in Italy. She ended up meeting my dad in Missouri when she was in college, and identifies as Afro-Latina. Married into a Black family, right? And was really apart from the people that she kind of grew up with. My dad's family became her family. I think the thing for her was, you're young, you have 2 kids, you work full time, and you're the only person that speaks Spanish in your house. So it was about being able to, find the time to teach me, and she didn't. What's going to throw you for a loop is that my mother is a Spanish teacher, or she was a Spanish teacher, and she was one for over 50 years. So we I'll be honest, we have arguments, because I'm like, I don't understand how you taught everybody else's kids and you didn't teach me. And yeah, there were times where I felt less than as a Puerto Rican woman, not knowing that. And there have been times where I've had very hurtful interactions with individuals that, are upset that I can't speak Spanish. I've had people cuss me out in Spanish when they see me, because they actually can tell, like, oh, you look Afro-Latina. How do you not speak? And start speaking Spanish and cussing me out in Spanish. So it's a complex world, but I think what we have to realize is no people are monolithic. I mean, the reality is, as Black people, right? Like, we are told oftentimes, you sound white. That doesn't make them less Black. Like, you might have this quote unquote dialect that people like to relate to white people. But when you walk down the street, before you open your mouth, you still have to deal with your Blackness. And so me not speaking Spanish doesn't make me less Puerto Rican. I still relate to the culture. I still relate to the experiences. I still have an understanding that individuals that might not be a part of the culture won't have. I still cook. There are a lot of other things that relate me to that. And sure, I don't speak Spanish. I speak English. My mom didn't teach me. It is what it is.
Well, cooking is a major, culture, how cultures blend. So let me ask this question because it's one of my favorites. Are you a fan and can you make pinchos?
Am I a fan?
A fan of pinchos. Yeah.
Yes. And I want to say this because the holidays just ended. Growing up, I always had Thanksgiving with my father's side of the family. So we had soul food, greens, dressing, yams, the whole nine. And I learned how to cook from my granny. So I know how to do all of that. But then at Christmas, we had Puerto Rican cuisine. So my mother would cook, and my abuela, when she was living, she would cook, and she taught us that. And so now I'm like if I don't have those two meals, on those holidays, for me, it's not the holiday. One year, my mom took me to Florida to visit one of my aunts, and she had made arroz con pollo, and she had all the, fixings, and I was mad. It was Thanksgiving. I was mad. I'm like, this is not what I eat on Thanksgiving. So.
Wow. It's such amazing. And, a lot of cultures, Black culture, wherever you're from, Spanish culture, the mix, you can bring history and say, this is why it's bigger than slavery, folks, of why we all eat the same things. We may just call it something different, have different seasonings. So, that's one thing that in music and, love can make us all unite. Mm-hmm. With Diversified now, how much of that Afro-Latina experience are corporations interested in? Because I know going through, Rotary clubs and different things, it's always, black folk, or it's gay, but Puerto Ricans, Colombians, especially in corporate, especially women, they don't really get talked about. There's not a lot of fuss on to make things equal and right, and because everyone has their issues. And even there's certain people who are minorities who will judge a beautiful woman like yourself and say, she's just here for the eye candy. She's just here for the promotion. She's not here for her ideas. She doesn't even speak Spanish, so she doesn't care about the Latinos and Latinas. So, how much of that are you seeing their issues being tackled?
For me, I have to be conscious when I enter into spaces about all people. One of the things that I like to do, and my company does, we do cultural assessments and surveys. We have surveys that we'll send out to all team members where we, want them to self-identify, but also give us information that they might not verbally be comfortable giving. So that they have a safe space to do it. And then we have one-on-one assessments with individuals. So we'll have like meetings with them and give them the opportunity, if there is something that they'd like to speak about it. I would say company is different. Every organization is different. I've been in places that actually do have a really strong Latinx population and understanding of what that means. And then in places that don't. And so I think it just depends on where you go. But it is about recognizing every aspect of diversity in every place that you go into. For me specifically, believe it or not, I would say that the hardest conversations I've had to have are not with people outside of the Latinx community. It's definitely within. Because to your points that I think you've made here, there are a lot of people that are just unaccepting. And race plays a role within the Latinx community. And that's why I really want people to understand what Blackness means and what whiteness means. Because, within the Latinx community, there's still racism, right? Like we can both be Puerto Rican and you see me as Black and you identify as white. And so we have the same exact issues that Black and white people have in America. And so there's that complexity as well.
Well, and when you talk about the issues in the Latin community, there's issues also in the Asian community. But if I focus just on the Latin community, do not get a Mexican and a Spaniard in the room together to have an argument. You're going to hear the argument not stop until people are talking about the gold that was stolen and, the or the opportunity that was given to them, they're the people. So it's just interesting because I mean that can be a fight, and that's probably why we don't see too many boxing matches between Mexico and Spain, because it's very just intense. And the same thing with Asians, don't get Japanese and Chinese or Filipinos. We'd all love to just get along, but we do make these inside or even of our own culture, Black folk. You got your bourgeoisie, you got your people who say, hey, I'm broke, or I relate to being broke. I came up broke and I'm never going to change, never going to put on a suit. How do you get companies to work out people's personal issues that their mother and father brought on?
So I think, again, it's about creating safe spaces. And safe spaces oftentimes lead to individuals feeling like they belong. One thing that I think is extremely valuable for a company to start to implement would be employee resource groups. Done the right way, because you'll see that there are employee resource groups for specific demographics that are unfortunately run by individuals that don't even fall within the demographic. And then it's like, how are you speaking to Blackness and you're not Black, right? Like, how are you speaking to the Asian American experience and you're not Asian? So I think creating spaces and empowering individuals who actually identify as what the group is to lead those spaces really does help. What I have found, one of the companies that I work for, we've implemented ERGs, and we do have individuals that identify leading. And, there's conversations that we do allow allies to come in and listen, but we are very cognizant of finding time to separate the two. And then empowering the leaders of these ERGs to have conversations with leadership about what they're hearing, not just their own personal experience, but now that they're leading a group of individuals that might think like them or feel like them, what is it that they're all saying? So when you commit to creating employee resource groups and understand the service that they can have within your company, then you're also committing to hearing the voices and then taking the things that are said back to the table to kind of institute change.
I love diversity work. I have felt that because I am a Black man running a consulting and PR firm, sometimes when we go after government work, people expect you just to go after diversity work only. And I say my love lock in my hair can do a lot more. This wisdom. Do you ever find yourself going into corporations and seeing people, maybe it's, let's say, Black people, hey, we started something and then it was overtaken by the Asians, or overtaken by, now we have, more white people than we have Black people in this group. And I saw it a whole bunch in Seattle, the whole city corporate, they need an overhaul, but they're in that get out stage where someone needs to flash them. And I'm personally just done enjoying this hot weather. But have you seen that? And can you, somehow, maybe if someone who's in that position are the majority, or maybe they're just the boss and like, oh, we didn't know. Okay, yeah, Black people did. Now we have a whole bunch of, Mzungus and others running it, saying minority, taking out the Black part.
Yeah, so you touch on two things here: people of color and the grouping that creates, and then allyship in certain situations, and the people that are not identifying members kind of taking over in certain settings. And so what I'll say is, I think the first thing with allyship is that it's important for the people that you are trying to be an ally for identify you as an ally. Like, they need to see you as one. You can't just self-identify and then boom, you're an ally. Like, I've got to actually recognize you as that and have conversations and trust that when you do speak for me, that it's going to be something that I actually agree with. What tends to happen is people are like, I'm ally, hear me roar, but we have had no conversation. And so you're speaking from your own experience, which in itself kind of leads back to privilege and audacity and supremacy, right? So definitely when you create spaces and you allow allies in, there has to be some sort of a system where you say, right now, we want to hear you and we want you to contribute. And then maybe there are certain instances where you just listen, because this is a learning opportunity for you. And in order for you to actually accurately represent, you've got to hear us. We do, however, need people to step up and be allies that we identify as such. in certain situations. There are unfortunately still rooms that white people can get into that Black people cannot, right? And so we need certain white people that we can identify as allies to go into those rooms and speak and trust that they're going to speak for us in the way that they said they would. So I think that's one. The second part that you brought up is the people of color grouping, which I understand that there are some shared experiences between people of color. However, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we don't separate what people of color means in certain situations. So my experience as a Black woman does not always look the same as someone who was Asian. And so, yeah, there can be some similarities in some situations, but a lot of times what happens in companies is we do group minority together. And then we even group representation under minority together. So when we say, oh, we have X amount of people at the company that are people of color, well, what does that really mean? So now you're saying that you have 20%, here that represent people of color, but only 1% are African American, only 2% are Latinx. So I think that we have to talk about that in a lot of instances as well.
Well, how do you go into a corporation and then maybe they're doing that part right, where they say, look, we have, this, we have something in a safe place for Black folk, but the Black person that they have is so far in the get out, such a Sambo, and has no backbone and is doing their, whatever, not even that the company might not be racist, maybe have the best, intentions, but it's who they pick. Again, something we see in corporate all the time. They get the most lily liver. I'm trying to find from the old school word that your grandmother might use, type of people that can't even stand up. So it's all right, master boss, we gonna get this right. And so how do you go into a corporation and say, this person you have chosen is the worst candidate?
Well, I think so that relates again back to Blackness versus whiteness. This isn't me talking about skin versus skin. It's what that idea of skin has presented us in forms of systems. So be clear that there are individuals that are Black that still sometimes find ways to benefit from systems that were set up and based in whiteness. And so I think when you go into organizations where you see maybe individuals that don't represent the greater picture of a group of minorities, then you're actually having to look at the systems and you're having to look at the things that are based in whiteness and have a conversation of what that means for your organization and for society. Then it just moves past the people. It moves directly into how something operates and why it operates that way.
All right. Are you able to make that, as a company, a third-party consultant come in and say that, or is that something that you can't control?
Yeah, I am. Well, first of all, I think that there's a misconception that because we are consultants that we take every client. So I first want to state that I have the authority and the ability to say no. And we don't work with everybody. And it's not always just based on them. I think that you have to have in partnership in DEI work, a relationship and an understanding and a belief in each other. And sometimes there isn't that. So there have been people that we've met that we know that this is 100% performative. And the way that you want us to show up for you is it is nothing about changing your organization or mentalities. It's really just about giving you a face. And what we won't be is that. So I think that's the kind of the first step of that. But I also recognize that, there are always individuals within organizations that have a farther road to travel than some others. And that's the work that we signed up for. So.
And you're in Austin, Texas right now, but able to go global if you guys have needs. It's nothing but a plane trip, business or first class, mandatory.
Yeah, I'm in Austin. One of my partners is in Chicago. My other partner is in Austin, and we do business globally.
Okay. Awesome. And, with that, Austin is one of those cities. I lived in Texas for 4 years. I'd run to Austin just to feel normal. Like, why? I'm not even hey, it reminds me of Berkeley. And I'm like, don't you get me on the piano at the dueling piano bar. It's just, it gives you that vibe. So Is this an issue still in a place like Austin?
It's an issue everywhere. I don't think that there's anywhere that it isn't an issue. I want to also be clear that I'm from Chicago, born and raised. I've been in Austin for a few years, but I actually started out when I came to Texas in Houston, and I left Houston for Austin for the reason that you just made. Austin for me felt just a little bit more like a place that I wanted to be in. I think originally I was like, Houston's a big city. You likely will be able to relate to Houston in a way that you could in Chicago, and that was not true. So sorry, I hope you can't hear my dog, but she's going crazy.
It's all part of the journey. It's all good.
So I ended up, here. Austin has a lot of things to work on, but I cannot tell you that there's a city that doesn't.
Okay. And have you done any international work?
For DEI work? No.
Okay. It sounds like there may be something else behind that. You might be like a movie star somewhere else. What international work have you done?
Well, I do, I've interviewed and had conversations with individuals in other countries, especially as it relates to DEI work. So just like you and I are sitting here and talking, people want to talk to me. So that happens. And then just as it relates to kind of contribution work that I do personally for my own brand, The Only Rachel. So that's why I kind of paused a little bit. But Diversified hasn't done international work now.
Okay, well, let's go into, Only Rachel, because I also saw you on the African Diaspora News Channel, and I was telling you before the interview, great job. What is Only Rachel? And then we're going to go into, you might have past TV experience as good as you are. So what tell us about Only Rachel?
I don't. It's just the opportunity for me as a individual person to speak about what I'm passionate about, what I know, and what I want to change. So I'm known as the conscious influencer. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that. My tags on everywhere are at The Only Rachel. And it really is just my platform to speak about social injustice and to use my voice, my circle of influence to make changes. And so that's what I do. I also coach individuals. So that if you go on my website, you'll see that there's a booking page. And a lot of people are attempting to figure out how to make an impact and where to start. And so I coach people because the reality is we all have influence. We just have to figure out where it is and how to use it. I think I'll use the movement right now as it relates to Black lives. And I think that a lot of people are really just focused on what they can do in the streets and criminal justice reform, and things that are specific to that. And all of that is important. But I think when we talk about Black life, we have to realize that there are so many different facets and parts of Black life. And so we have to be represented everywhere. There has to be people that are actually impacting and influencing in every area of life. So I don't care if it's within education, within religion, whatever it is, like we need people to be influencers, impactors, activists, advocates in all areas. I'm an adoptive mother. So I was a foster to adopt mom. I fostered children for a while, specifically minority children, and I adopted 3 Black children. And so I definitely use my platform to speak out about that as well. There just aren't enough of us doing that. There aren't enough of us stepping up for our children that are within the system. When I was licensed to foster, one of the first things that I learned was that in the state of Texas, there's this idea that there are more minorities in the system than white children, but it's actually not true. It's just that there are more minorities that are left in the system, which tells me that there are more white families that come and step up and say, I want to adopt a white child. So it was my focus to say, like, I hope all children have a home. All children need love. However, for me specifically, I want to impact my community, and this is one of the ways I'm going to do it. So.
Well, talking about that, I just did an interview a couple of weeks ago because of my background in mental health and working for the government in that area for, children's protective rights and all that CPS. And it is difficult to adopt, whether you're doing it in this country or Uganda. I mean, just horror stories. And I have my own sometimes crazy hypothesis why a child can get so used to a home, and right when they try to do the final stage of making it stable, nope, gotta pull them out. So how was that journey for you, and do you have any tips for people to make it any easier, because we know the government is not?
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy process, and I'm not going to ever lie and say that it is. I will say that every child is different, and so that means every process is unique, because the reason why they're in the system is going to contribute to how it kind of goes and what ends up happening. I can tell you that my adoption for my son was extremely difficult. My son was born biologically, his parents were in prison. So he had never met them. He immediately was in the system. He didn't have any recollection. He went to a family member and was removed from the family member. When we adopted him, we thought that this was going to be an easy process. His parents are in prison. They're not getting out anytime soon. But what ended up happening was his father contested from prison his rights being revoked. And so it just prolonged the process. It was a whole thing. It cost money. We had to get lawyers. Whereas with my daughters, it was 6 months, which is how long you're supposed to have, them in your home before you can adopt, an instant. So I think, it just depends. My advice would be, one, do your research. So also, figure out what laws are in your state, how your system works within your state, because every state is different. Do your research on agencies, because agencies are supposed to serve as the people that advocate for you as a foster family. So you want to make sure that you have the right one and that you can trust the people that are going to be working with you. I recommend working with an agency instead of just going through the state, because they do know people and they know things and they can help. And if you are going the route of fostering to adopt, because there are different ways in which you can adopt, you can just enter in for straight adoption, you can do foster to adopt, you can do respite. But if you enter in as foster to adopt, then understand that there's no promise that the kids that come into your home are going to become adoptable. So be prepared to let them go, because reunification is always their goal. And therapy. In between kids, go to therapy, because it's a loss. And there is real trauma that comes with having these kids in your home. So,
Wow. Yeah, definitely. I sometimes think, depending on what organization, especially like group home type settings, the children are the money. So sometimes they don't want to let them go. They don't mind if you take them for a little bit, but bring them right back or give them to a friend so they can be recycled. And that's why kids will go to an average of like 25 or 30 homes if they stay them. And they get institutionalized like a prisoner. They're used to certain things. A lot of our people don't adopt. They'll say, oh, well, we don't have money, or I want my own children. Is there anything did you always know you wanted to be adopted parent? And does, having your own children, is that going to take away from your efforts in the adoption? Like, hey, I got my own kids now. I can't adopt every kid that, comes my way or that I hear.
yeah, I mean, I think you have to be smart about what you can and can't do. Just even if you were biologically, having your children, what is your end? Like when is too many kids too many kids? I think that has to be a question that you ask yourself no matter what. Some people can have 10 and do fine, and others are like, my limit is 2, and you have to be smart about that. And so for me, I did close my doors. I fostered for a while. I adopted. The 3 children that I have adopted are my focus. And so for them, I think what's best is not to bring other kids in, at least right now. I don't know what the future holds. So I'm not saying that it won't happen, but right now I need to be there for them. And I can tell you, there are people that ask questions like, don't you want to carry your own, or don't you feel like you'll feel slighted, and all these things. And one, I want to say to people listening that that's rude as hell. Don't ask people that. But I don't feel like I've missed anything at all. You could not tell me I didn't birth those children. And if you go look at my page and see them, you actually would never know if I didn't tell you either. So they were always meant to be mine. Whether we have blood or not, our spirits are connected, and they were meant to find each other. And it's crazy because the day my daughters came, I opened the door and my oldest daughter was like, "Hi, mommy." Instantly. And it's been like that. Now I know everyone's story isn't the same, so I don't want to sell this idea that every situation will be like that. and I was blessed. I get that. But I can tell you that loving them is something that I was made to do. And I don't feel slighted at all. So,
And going back to your rude comment, I think people forget that some folks can't, for whatever reason, have
right,
children.
exactly.
And it's none of your business for me to tell you my medical history. Now, I come from a family of women, and everyone has a child out of 13 uncles and aunts. Everyone has a child except one. But I have that one would tell you in a second, you need to mind your business. And if you don't, that Oakland, that Oconda could come out. But it is none of people's business. And again, your feeling is your feeling. I have a lot of people that I mentee, and I say it's a lifetime type mentorship, whether it's pay or no pay, because I'm sowing into their life. And I don't have boys, I have 2 girls, but those are my boys. And I don't call them that, because when they're grown men, that's kind of weird, and they ain't got to call me daddy. That's doing too much, right? But if they need something, they know, even if it's just game, wisdom, a connection, sometimes it's money. But yeah, I definitely get that. Now, you just mentioned, which you could repeat the same thing that you just said, but I ask all my guests, what is their community give back that they are doing or that they want to do in the future? So please let us know.
Yeah, so definitely, I think the biggest thing, my passion is activism and advocacy as it relates to foster care, to adoption, and to minority children, and as it relates to Black people. And I unapologetically say that. And so again, when you follow me, theonlyrachel.com, you'll see that. One of the things that I do outside of the influencer coaching is I have a club called the Conscious Club that people can sign up for. It's a mailing list, and I send out weekly emails where I am kind of updating people on the things that are happening within the community, but also assisting them with finding ways that they can do impact right from their house. So you're looking to get started, trying to figure out how to be more conscious and what to do. Well, I'm about to give you something to do every week. So you can't say that there's nothing right in front of you. So for me, it's just whatever I need to do to make sure that life for my people and for these children are better, that systems are disrupted, then that's what I'm going to do. So I think that's my answer.
No, that's great. And the experiences you go through of, I don't know how old your oldest is. How old is he or she?
She's 6.
She's 6. Okay. So you haven't yet experienced like that item that you just knew was going to be in the refrigerator. I have a 10 and a 7-year-old. And sometimes I don't know how my pops and my mom did it, because it was 4 of us plus cousins and everything around. But to go into that fridge and not have that item, you say, man, what happened to that Haagen-Dazs? Hold on. All of the bars, all 3 or 4 or whatever Haagen-Dazs gives you, they're gone. You still have to go through those experiences just as a parent. So now that's a beautiful, I love it. I love it. Now, do you have a book or, any plans on a book coming out?
Right now, I don't. But I am always open to contributing. So if people are looking for a writer, that is something that I do and I can do. My actual degree is in English, so I can do it. But right now, I don't have plans.
Okay. And anything, in the film arena, I know, again, we mentioned the, contribution to the African diaspora, but is TV, film, is that a passion of yours?
I can't say that it's a passion, but I won't also say that it's not an interest. Again, if it's going to be in alignment with my brand and what I support, then I'm always open to discuss it.
Okay. And this question, and it may be my last, but I want you to give the young women out there some game, because you could do anything that you want, internally, but you could also, I mean, you could be Beyonce, right? And you could do all the things that you see on entertainment. And right now we're seeing people wanting to be so in front of the camera just because they are a beautiful person and they want to, show everything. And it seems like you were raised where I just look like this, but it's not who I am. And I just want you to kind of tap in and tell people, because I can't do that. My focus has always been on my knowledge, whatnot. I know I have a stunning, exterior, but it's not like that's what I've been judged off. And I think a lot of times women especially can be judged off, oh wow, she's beautiful, she can do whatever she wants. And so how do you control that, and how do you put that out there where that energy is just so balanced?
Well, one, I don't want to, I want to acknowledge that beauty bias is a real thing. Being in DEI work, I know that that's a real thing. And sometimes it is not intentional, it's unconscious. That's why unconscious bias work is a thing. And that's why we talk about it and we train. So, yes, beauty bias is real. And so I won't ever ignore the experiences of other people that have unfortunately had to deal with what that meant for them in a negative way. So I do acknowledge that. But what I will say is we all have something. Me being a woman is still something that I have to work through and have to always overachieve and prove myself in situations. Being a Black woman also, right? So I think that the reality is you don't know someone's story unless you are them. And you don't know the things that they've had to overcome unless you are them. So I do have to still overcome my own obstacles. And I am underestimated all the time, just like a lot of people are. I do not apologize for the knowledge that I have because I earned it, because I study for it, because, you know what I'm saying? I've educated myself to do that. So I don't apologize for that. I don't apologize for what I look like. I think the reality is what I would tell any woman is be unapologetically you and live in whatever that means, and understand that when you recognize that being unapologetically you unlocks a certain power, you'll then see that you're able to accomplish a lot of things that you might not have ever imagined you'd be able to, but you can.
Well, that's great game. And, I'm raising two girls, LondonandSydney.com. And I always tell them, don't be a pretty idiot. Study, read, don't, what you're seeing right now in this entertainment, it's all fake. Don't be a pretty idiot. And they just laugh at me and say, oh, daddy. And I say, yeah, I know I'm funny, but I need you guys to boss up and queen up always. Queen up, y'all. Y'all hear that? So, Rachel, I thank you for coming on and giving the game. Do you want to leave the people with anything?
I do. I truly appreciate you for having me on the show. Listen, I want everyone out there that owns a business, that works in a business, that manages within a business to understand that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not something that you talk about one day and forget about tomorrow. It really does need to be in the fabric of your organization. So if you need some assistance in that area, please visit www.diversifiednow.com, and we would be happy to enter and to help you with that. And again, visit me at theonlyrachel.com, as well as on all social media at theonlyrachel. I look forward to connecting and assisting you with influencing change.
Links will be in the description, folks. Make sure you share this information. Somebody needs to hear this, even if it's one person share it, another person share it, because this is the type of game that is, you're not going to hear this on your local radio. That's not the intention of local radio. It's to entertain you. This is to educate you as well as be as entertaining as possible. So, Rachel, thank you for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.